and I have had a number of conversations about art in different manifestations. I guess we spoke originally about a year ago about this opportunity you had in Spain. And so we talked about ways that we could support your work and the idea that you would come back and teach us and share with us a little bit of what you encountered. Joe's a member of the congregation, 3 daughters who are part of our program here. What do we have? 7th grade, 9th grade, and 12th grade, right?
Yeah, well done. Yeah.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joe for the rest of the evening, and I will moderate when we get time for questions, answers, and comments. Right, please.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. It's an honor to have you guys here. So, hi, I'm Joe. I'm a visual artist, and I'm going to talk with you about my experiences and work when I participated in an artist residency in Madrid this past summer. And it was a project that started by questioning borders. Can you guys hear me? Oh, you hear me pretty well?
Folks at home, are you hearing okay? Okay.
Okay.
Thank
Cool.
you.
So just to give you a little rundown of my presentation, first, I'm going to give you some background on what brought me to Spain. And then I'm going to show you some of the artwork I was making before my residency for context. And after I show you my work during the residency, I'm going to show you how that experience impacted my current in my studio now. So let's see here. Here we go. So back in the summer of 2023, I took my 3 daughters to Spain. It was the first time that I'd ever been to Spain. And it was also the first time that the 3 of them had ever left really the Northeast United States together. And we traveled to the Andalusian region of Spain, which is mostly the southern part. And while I was there, I fell in love with the Mudéjar design and artwork that was all over that area. And these photos are taken in Granada at the Alhambra. So that type of artwork is specifically from this period called the Al-Andalus, and it's—
Excuse me for 1 second. However, are you having a hard time? There's a screen share. You should be saying, don't look at the screen, look at your screen. Got it? Okay, thank you. Sorry about that.
All right, cool. So anyway, so it was the Al-Andalus time period is when, for many centuries, where Muslims ruled over that area of Spain. And it's a remarkable time because it's known for a time when the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians lived together more or less, they coexisted more or less peacefully. But what's most notable is how much this cultural exchange that happened germinated a period of where the art and the science and philosophy really flourished during the time. And it's also known as the golden age of the Sephardi. So the Sephardic Jews are from that region. While I was there, a good friend of mine told me about a museum there for the Sephardic Jewish Museum. So I went to visit that museum in Granada, and it was really hard to find. You could find it everywhere online, but when I went to look for it, it was in this residential neighborhood and there were no signs. And I had to ask a neighbor that lived in that neighborhood to help me find it. And he had never even heard of it. And then with his help, I did find the door that was barely marked. And this woman, Bathsheba, opened the door and I met her. And her and her family own and operate the museum out of their home. There's one of the only Jewish families in Granada and in that region. When there's a school in Granada, a university, and so when it's not in session, they're really like the only ones there. And so from her and from the museum and the artifacts there, I learned a lot about the history of the Jews in Spain. I learned about the anti-Semitism they experience, and I learned more about the history of the Jews. So we all kind of know about the Inquisition, I learned about how in the late 14th century, violence and riots towards the Jews really escalated, and the violence got worse and worse as Jews were forced to either convert or be killed or leave. And finally, in 1492, they were all expelled. But I also learned about more recent things. So there had been attempts at reparations. In 1924, there was the Sephardic Jewish diaspora was granted citizenship in Spain. So there was this attempt to kind of make good for what had happened. But then in 1968, the citizenship was revoked, and there was another mass exodus out of Spain. A lot of the Jews left then again. More recently, in 2015, there was a law passed for Jews, the Sephardic diaspora, to they could apply for citizenship if they wished again. But then I think it's 2018 or 2019, the law expired, and so nothing's really been done. So really not a very welcoming environment for Jews in Spain. But nonetheless, I fell in love with Spain. I really loved it there, and I was determined to return and to come back, being able to focus on my artwork. So later that fall, I learned of an opportunity, an artist residency at a place called A Studio in Madrid. It's a contemporary art community, art studio space that is placed in the neighborhood of Carabanchel in Madrid. And so I developed a project for the application for that that space, for the iStudio space. And my project was really based off of three main ideas. The first was sort of knowing that we're all one, and that peace comes from the recognition of that knowledge within us and between us. That knowledge, thinking of that as opposed to borders that we impose on each other, so specifically geographic and political and religious borders. The dichotomy of those two things. The next thing that I was interested in investigating more was this relationship for Jews in Spain, and that compared with my own experiences growing up as a Jew in the Bible Belt south of North Carolina, and my own experiences with othering in that way. And lastly, really a personal investigation for me. I grapple with misgivings about organized religion. I have a lot of problems with dogma and religion, but at the same time, I feel a really strong spiritual connection to Jewish mystical traditions and other mystic traditions, and to my ancestry and the culture of Judaism. So these are things that I'm always sort of wrestling with. So I was interested in what would it be like to return to Spain and be able to investigate these borders through my artwork. So I applied for the residency, and to my delight, I was accepted. And my further delight, I received support from Jewish organizations here so that I was able to attend, participate. So that's kind of how I ended up going to Madrid. But before I take you there, I wanted to show you some of my artwork I was making before that time. So these are just a few pieces that I made in 2023. A good friend of mine the year earlier had given me a beautiful set of watercolors. And although I've always dabbled in watercolor, for the first time, I really started a new relationship with the medium. I started more deeply exploring the versatility of watercolor and really pushing its limits. And what emerged were these sort of organic formations, some walls and strange atmospheres, islands, and themes of separateness and searching for connection. And all of these works were small works on paper, really the biggest kind of about this size. And then I went to Madrid. There's my feet in Madrid. These are my trusted companions. So anybody who knows me knows that I always have a sketchbook with me. I designated 2 sketchbooks to be my Spain books. The one on the left had beautiful watercolor paper in it, and so it was for me to be able to paint in. And the one on the right was one more for ink that I would draw and write notes into. And this was my my living space and my studio at iStudio in Madrid. The left side, the left image is my little twin bed, and on the other side of the room was my workspace, a little desk. And you'll see here on the left side, this shows you kind of the more common spaces in the A studio. And that was my kitchen. And on the right was my view outside of my window. There's a paddleboard club right behind me. So that was the soundtrack to my life in my studio, was the bouncing and the smacking of the paddle balls, sometimes late into the night. But if you see just beyond, there's a cemetery, a really large cemetery back there. And for me, it was grounding. I liked having that cemetery be there, reminding me of loved ones that have passed and of ancestry. When I first arrived, on my desk was a small vase of dried flowers, and the same kind of flowers that my mother used to collect. And in my little bathroom, it smelled of lily of the valley, and that was one of her favorite scents. So one of the first things I did was make a painting of those flowers in the book, and it felt like she was with me. It was a really nice homecoming for me. So this is my neighborhood. This is Carabanchel. Carabanchel is a little bit like the Brooklyn of Madrid, but like Brooklyn 20 years ago. So interesting and gritty, and there were some art galleries and art things happening, but you kind of had to look for them. And it was a lot of character. And I found a lot of inspiration from the colors and shapes around me there, textures. This was a beautiful park by the river that separates Carabanchel and Madrid. This was my neighborhood at night. So here's me and Lucia. Lucia, the lovely lady on the left, she was a college student that is an intern for a studio. And she had, before I arrived, she had studied my work, researched my work and my project. And so she had provided me a whole list of information and resources that she thought might be helpful for me while I was there, which was awesome. And my plan was really to explore Madrid through outdoor spaces with my sketchbooks. I plan to spend a lot of time in parks and restaurants and bars and cafes with my sketchbooks, but also to visit cultural centers like the Kabbalah Center and the Islamic Center, and of course a lot of museums and places where I could find art. But central to my visit also was to travel to Toledo, which is a medieval city that is only about 30 minutes by train from Madrid. It's known to be one of the best preserved cities from the Al-Andalus period. So for a long time, I've been interested in fractals and sacred geometry. Sacred geometry is the study of geometric shapes and patterns found in nature and across various cultures. It's a lot of times there is meaning ascribed to these symbols. They can represent sort of a divine order within the universe, or connection from the physical world to the spiritual realm. And these shapes tap into ancient mystic traditions and are still found everywhere in modern times and all over religious structures. And so I started to think about how sacred geometry is a thread that ties many cultures and religions together. And I decided I would take special notice of moments where I encountered these shapes and patterns while in Madrid, and especially while in Toledo, which is not hard. You can find this stuff everywhere. I mean, we can probably find sacred geometry all over this social hall. But it was kind of a fun game for me as I moved along to find these patterns and shapes. And I got myself a compass and I started creating geometric shapes as well, wondering if they could be a sort of prayer for me through my experience in Spain. So I spent a lot of time in parks, like I mentioned. This is Las Cruces Park, which is in my neighborhood. It's a beautiful space. I wonder if this will have sound. No, you can't hear the sound. This is one of the fountains in the park. Retiro Park in the center of Madrid, in the gorgeous space, and some of these beautiful manicured gardens, and Madrid Botanical Gardens. That's an artichoke plant on the right. The bee. So I would kind of just, set up shop, and usually would be a park bench. Sometimes I'd be lucky enough to have a table, and I would paint. Sometimes I would listen to music or podcasts as I painted. Sometimes I would just sit and listen to the sounds around me, the people talking. That's what I happen to be working on in that video. And sometimes I would bring the paintings home into the studio to finish them if I didn't finish them when I was outside. So like I mentioned, I would sit in cafes a lot. Anybody who's been to Europe, I can't speak for all of Europe, but certainly in Spain, one wonderful thing is that you can sit at a restaurant or a cafe for as long as you want, and nobody's going to hurry you along. The Spaniards really relish in time to enjoy food, enjoy a coffee, enjoy company of other people, and those sort of things are prioritized. And they love artists and they love art, so they're not going to disturb me for sitting there and taking up space.
What's going on in the background?
That's Mickey and Minnie Mouse. That's what it looks like. Yeah, that's why I took that picture. I really liked that juxtaposition. This is actually Plaza Mayor, which is like one of the famous central plazas in Madrid. And I would bring my compass. There's like these some of those geometric shapes I would make. Here's another cafe.
Was that like 2 ones back?
This one?
No, before that. Oh, the people. Was that multitudes of people, like a pilgrimage?
It looks like that, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Like they're all going to the walled city,
Follow the yellow brick road.
Yeah. Yeah, let me know if I'm going too fast through the slides, if anybody wants me to slow down. So yeah, these were sort of how my drawings would progress. Sometimes it'd start in one spot, and then I would carry it to another place wherever I ended up and keep moving with it. And sometimes I would finish it there or finish it in my studio. I just really got into the geometry stuff. And so, like I mentioned, I wanted to visit some cultural centers, and I visited the Kabbalah Center, hoping to find some sort of spiritual connection while I was there. Just interested in what I would find. And it was similar to looking for the Sephardic Museum. There were no signs on the street, even though I could find it online easily. It was inside of kind of like an office-y space. And this is the door. You can see the mezuzah there, which is identifying, and then there's the small plaque over on the left. So inside, I met Paolo Mochi, who ran the Kabbalah Center, and he was a very zealous fan of Kabbalah and mostly wanted me to just go visit the Kabbalah Center in New York. So it was kind of like, okay, I don't know, not so interested in that, but I did like they had this artwork up there of the 72 names of God, and he told me that a friend of his who made that while he was in prison, and Paolo Moshe, he suggested that maybe I should meditate on the 72 names of God. So I was like, all right, maybe I'll do that. So I divided 72 by the amount of days that I had remaining in Madrid. And I thought, okay, I'm going to spend each day, I'm going to write that amount of the names of God in my book and meditate on that. But this was about as far as I got. This is all I did.
So how many days were you over there?
I was there for 2 weeks.
So there's a question, is you work on watercolor now?
No, but I do use a lot of watercolor still. Paulo also gave me this pocket-sized copy of the Zohar, which is pretty cute. So I visited the Islamic Center in Madrid, which was not very populated, but
Or was it easier to find?
much easier to find.
Oh, okay.
And there's some sacred geometry there. It was pretty cool. They had a ton of information about the Al-Andalus period, and I learned a lot about the Muslim influence and could see how much it's still very much a part of Spain. Like every Spanish word that starts with AL, there's a lot of them, is kind of basically is left over from that period. I wrote something here looking at, it was sort of showing the Muslim empire. I wrote waves, the empires wash over the land with force, one after another. So I found another cultural center on my own, just sort of wandering around in my neighborhood, and it was called ECO. And it was interesting. If you see this picture on the left, I did this red circle around one of the stickers because you can't really make it out. But this is what I first saw when I walked in. I first saw a Free Palestine sticker, which is pretty normal to see everywhere. But because I was in Spain, I noticed that it scared me a little bit. But then I walked in and I met these super friendly older guys named Pedro and Don Miguel, and they told me that ECHO was a place for everyone. And we talked about all the work that they do. And it was a really interesting spot. These artists had occupied a building about 15 years ago. It was an abandoned building. And the government kind of just left them alone. And they occupy it. And there happened to be a Peruvian film festival going on. So I sat down and I started to enjoy the festival. And I thought I was more confident in my Spanish than I should have been because I had no idea what was going on. So then I got a tour of the building, and it really was this cool community center art space. There was like a little restaurant and a library and a boxing room and yoga studio and a dance room, childcare. And the folks there also did a lot of social justice work around the neighborhood. When I left, I was relieved. I found myself relieved to see this anti-Nazi sticker when I left. And it made me aware of just how quick the body can be to judge things and feel these things based off of our preconceived notions. So back in my studio space, I had gotten some really beautiful big paper from big enough that I could do some stuff, but still maybe fit in my suitcase from a beautiful paper store in Madrid. And I started playing around with the geometric shapes a little bit on bigger scale. There's one of those. And then I was off to Toledo. So this is one of the train station in Madrid, and I just loved walking in there and seeing all of these plants. It was so beautiful.
That's a train station? Oh
Yeah.
my God.
Yeah. Thinking about taking her back tomorrow is just like.
A little bit different of a vibe. And here's Toledo when I got off the train and walked up to the city. It's this medieval city, so there's walls, you know, that surround the city, and it's up on a hill. And some sacred geometry on the left. This was a guy, I wish I could remember his name. I probably have it written down somewhere, but he was a character. I met him as I was walking up the hill to enter the city, and we had a nice long conversation. And at the end of our conversation, he asked me if I had a boyfriend. And when I said yes, he said he thought he could be a better lover than my American boyfriend. So I politely declined his offer, and we parted ways. So Toledo is known for its Jewish quarter, among other things. It's one of the best preserved areas of Judaism from the medieval times. And it was cool to see they project these lights at night in that area. There's also these like little tiles, a Judaica, that are embedded all over the streets and the areas in the Jewish quarter. I mean, they're like everywhere. So it's kind of fun game to kind of just spot them. What is that like? I want to say where's Waldo, but I don't know if it works like that. Maybe.
Geocaching.
Yeah, geocaching,
Geo-
like an Easter egg hunt. Well,
Geocaching. Yeah.
not an Easter
Easter
egg
egg.
hunt.
Yeah. It was fun, guys. It was like a little game. One of the first places I visited was the Synagogue del Transito. This was built in 1357, kind of before things got superheated for the Jews over there. There's also this small museum, much better marked than the other one in Granada. So the examples of the Mudahar design there was just breathtaking, just so ornate, and to see these arabesque designs mixed with the Hebrew, and it was really beautiful. And there was a map of Jerusalem in the synagogue. And I don't consider myself a Zionist, and I'm a pacifist. As a pacifist, I'm deeply opposed to all war and the war in Israel. But an interesting thing happened when I saw this map, and being in a foreign land, I did feel this sort of pull at my heart. And it was a pull that was not coming from myself, I would say, but coming probably from somewhere deep in my DNA. I think being Jewish is a complex and often challenging experience. It's a really strange thing to be ancestrally tied to a group of people that have been misunderstood and displaced and persecuted so much in the history of the world. And for me personally, to at once feel sort of repelled by the dogmatic aspects of the religion, but also inextricably attached to the lineage. These were all things that were really piercing my heart at this time. This is a slide of the ceiling in that synagogue. It's kind of amazing how well it's preserved, all wooden, and tons of sacred geometry mixed with the Mudahar's designs.
You have to lay down to get that photo?
That one, okay, I can take credit for all but 2 photos in this. That one was not mine. I took that from the internet, guys.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm glad you brought it up because I should have said that. This one, this is mine, but you can see it a little bit from there at the top.
Did you scan it in your file? Was it like a postcard or something?
This one, I copied it. So it was I did like a Google search for the synagogue, and it was an image that came. So I just
Nice.
don't tell anybody. I'm not going to sell it or anything. So this was my favorite spot in Toledo, the Synagogue de la Santa Maria la Blanca. So a really good example of how this strange dichotomy of how, when the Christians came to rule things, they converted all of the mosques and the synagogues into churches. And the Catholic Church still sort of owns and operates those buildings. I just love this place, these columns, with these ornate, artwork. And then, of course, my sacred geometry, couldn't help but find that. When I was there, I sat on the floor and made a drawing, and then later in the evening, sat in a cafe and started to paint on it. What came from that? This was the other picture that I didn't paint. So lastly, I visited the Mezquita del Cristo de Nápoles, which was built in 999 and is known just because it's pretty rare how well preserved the mosque is. In the main prayer area, there were these domed ceilings with all of this geometry and interesting patterns in it. And then in the main altar space, there was this modern day kind of Christ figure in there. And it was kind of this painful reminder of the past and of a wound that really hasn't healed for many people. So it's interesting, the buildings in Toledo are monuments in a way to this golden age of Sephardi, but and this idea of this peaceful coexistence and cultural exchange. But it's hard to be there without the seemingly insurmountable oppression that continues for cultural groups today. I expected to feel sort of a sense of spiritual peace when I was there in this, what is called the spiritual Mecca of the West. But there was just so many reminders of conflicts everywhere. Sometimes it just made me feel more unease. But I loved being in Toledo. And at the same, the city was so beautiful, and these medieval cities, if you've ever been in one, with these crooked winding streets and these walls all around, it was kind of dizzying at times and could feel overwhelming. And I felt like it's sort of mirroring this overwhelm that I felt by all of this information I was taking in. So in some ways it was sort of like a relief to leave. This is the train station leaving Toledo back to Madrid.
Did you visit Maimonides' birthplace? There's a statue in Toledo where Maimonides grew up, and it's kind of like where he's.
Yeah, I did see that. Have you visited Toledo?
Yeah, I've lived there for a while.
Oh my God.
Right, well, Madrid, but I've visited Toledo for many times. So
Oh,
that was one of the
cool.
highlights of seeing that Jewish section was where Maimonides was from. So
Yeah. Oh, cool. You have probably a lot to add. I'd love to hear from you. So yeah, back in my studio, sort of letting things happen, working with pen and ink and also with watercolor. I also started using vellum too. This is pieces of vellum taped over a drawing.
So with the class that you took, did you have direction from the class as to was the geometry part of the class, or did they give you any tools? I mean, what was the structure?
Well, it wasn't really like a class. It was more like a class for myself that I made up, and I was the teacher and the student.
Oh.
Yeah, but I was given the
How
studio.
many people were in this class? Did you?
I was given the studio space. I was given the space,
So
and the support of the organization. But I was given the freedom to do really whatever I wanted. I just sort of proposed these ideas that I wanted to investigate, and then from there, kind of took it on my own to figure out what that meant.
nice.
This is a sketch that I started I think I did the whole thing in a restaurant one evening. And I took a piece of vellum. I'm not sure if you can see it on the screen, but on the left side, I traced the drawing and then flipped the vellum to the right side to see what would happen when that reflection was placed on top of it. And my remainder of the time in Madrid, I really focused on looking at art. I went to a lot of different galleries, museums. and took in various types of artwork. Those are both photographs. This is a photograph too. I was taken by this one exhibition by an American artist named James Lee Byers. And this particular piece is interesting. It's called the Rose Table of Perfect. It's an object that's 1 meter in diameter made of fresh roses. And I thought it was interesting. He used the number 3,333 because it was a reference, some sort of reference to Kabbalistic numerology. But it was so cool because you could smell the piece before you even saw it as you like entered the room. And there was no water. And these roses were put into the sphere and just left to organically deteriorate. I think they'd been there for several weeks by the time I saw it. This is some more work I did back in my studio and in my book. And on one of my last days, I discovered Madrid, Rio, a park that goes along the river, and sat and absorbed the scene of just families picnicking and children playing. A lot of my work really is, I think, describing the ineffable and the unseen. And I started creating these images. I feel like take some of the essence of sacred geometry, sort of connecting that spiritual world and the physical realm. On my last day at a studio, I made a sort of exhibition for myself and took in what I had made. And I had a revelation that had been coming throughout my time there, that these smaller works that I was making there and also before the residency were really kind of studies for larger works. And I had a strong urge to start working at a much bigger scale, sort of like the scale of my body, when I returned to my studio at home. And this was my last drawing in that book. This is when I returned home. And I took a lot of the works that I was making and really started working much larger with them. This is one of the pieces that I was working on. This is another one. This is one that was, you might remember some of these sort of forms from one of my sketchbooks. So I would look at that and then really take it larger and push it further. These are pretty big pieces. They're like 5 feet by 7 feet. This one is on paper. This is a little smaller. I also started this thing where I wanted to make more gestural pieces that were sort of emotive, but also I wanted them to be throwaway pieces because I didn't want to think about if anybody was going to look at them or not. I wanted to know, like, so I did them on craft paper, which is a material that's like, it's not archival and it's not meant for any art mediums really to like adhere to. Yeah, so just knowing that like this is something just to take the pressure off. So I did a lot of these with charcoal and pastel. And I took photos of them. And then I was like, oh, I like these. I kind of want to make some that I can actually keep and show to the world. So this is one that I did on paper. This is about 30 inches by 36 inches. And lately I've been doing ones that are on this material called parachute cloth, which is super cool. It feels like a fabric. It's very soft, but it's actually a synthetic material and it's a little bit translucent and it's super durable. So these are 30 by 30 inches that I've been making a bunch like these for an exhibition I have coming up. So this is a sketch from when I was in Spain. I made this in one of the parks. I was listening to a podcast with some scientists talking about the brain's default mode network. So it's a name for basically, you know, we have these neurons that travel along pathways. And the more that they travel on the same pathway, the deeper those grooves get. And we just sort of tend to go those paths on autopilot. Kind of like if you're driving to work and you just kind of end up there, like you don't think about the turns that you're making because it's just the path of least resistance. So they were talking about how important it is to develop other pathways in our brains. And there's a lot of ways to do this, but mainly it all involves getting into a state of sensation exploration, they called it. So mindfulness, but putting yourself in new situations, putting yourselves situations of not knowing, and really taking things in with all of your senses. I found that interesting. This was a quote on the wall of the building of the botanical gardens I visited. We are so familiar with our landscape, our flora, and our fauna that we do not realize the extraordinary natural wealth in which we live immersed. So traveling always brightens the senses, and I think we return new and different from what we've experienced. For me, questioning borders and playing with those edges has really helped me push my understanding of myself and the world. So that's it. I want to take a moment to thank Rabbi Jack and Congregation Shaarai Shomayiim and Miriam Baumgardner and JCAL for all of the support in this endeavor. Without it, I really couldn't have done this residency. And their investment in my art practice is humbling, and it's also deeply encouraging and inspiring me to continue to explore and share my work. So thank you. And thank you guys. Thank you for your interest and for
Michael, I have a technical question.
Yeah.
It sounds basic, but when you're working in a notebook like that with watercolors, how long do you have to wait before you can close the books? You don't smush the colors all over the pages.
Depends how wet it is. I mean, depends how much water you're using. But one of the wonderful things about watercolor is it dries really quickly. I mean, some people find that one of the most frustrating things about it. Depends how you look at it. But yeah, it dries super quickly. So usually not that long. Sometimes I'll stick a brush there when I close the pages as a little separator if I feel like it's gonna be too much. And I just wanted to say one last thing. This is where you can find me if you guys do want to get in touch for those people online. There's a QR code to my website, but there's my email address there. And I lead workshops and meetups and groups to help people more deeply connect with themselves and others through art. And I have a open to the public free open studio that I host at the Candy Factory every first Saturday and some other Saturdays, where you can just come, show up, bring an art project you're working on. If you don't have anything, I'll have art materials there and I give demos and stuff. So I just wanted to let you guys know about that. And sounds like you guys have questions for me, but I also have a question for everybody else.
Joe, if you don't mind, if it's possible, to take this down so we can see the people on the screen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Take it down.
So why don't you pose your question and then we'll.
My question is, I'm interested in how many of you, how you have examined or questioned your own borders, and if so, how you do that or how you have done that in the past. And I'm also happy to answer any questions anybody has too.
Well, don't give them that opportunity yet. Let's hear answers to your question. And anyone want to respond to Joe's question before we? Marty, you want to respond to Joe's question, or do you have a question of your own?
I have a question.
Well, hold off if you don't mind. Tony, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the question makes me just think of, well, something that I've learned actually, because I belong to the Candy Factory, but also in other places, it's about preconceived notions about people, and the borders that I put up for myself with my preconceived notions. And at the Candy Factory, there are so many different kinds of people doing so many different kinds of things that I may have put judgment on, or I do put judgment on initially, like, so this person does that thing, they must be like this or this. And then you get to know people in different contexts, and you fill the picture out and you find out that there's so much more going on than you thought. And I'm also a photographer, and I, I'm I'm lucky when I get to go to different places and meet people doing what they do. And I might have an idea of what I think they are and what they're doing and all this stuff. And then by the time I'm done, it's like a completely different thing. I just, it's different. The personality, everything's filled out, and it's kind of amazing. And it's a process of getting over my own sort of fears and judgments. So
Hava, Mike? You're muted, Hava.
Okay. Thank you so much. I can't tell you how I appreciate seeing things through your eyes and your soul. It's beautiful. I was I started learning yoga when I was 26 because I was in a car accident. And the doctors wanted to operate on my back, and I thought, I think I'll go to yoga instead. But I started in seminary the next year, and I found that through being in touch with my body, specifically my spine, and not living in my head, I was able to just be in touch with other souls, other living beings like trees and animals and things like that. And when I look at your work and I hear you speak, that's what I hear happening is, um, I'm going to use the G word here. I believe that we all have a God-given expansion that is unlimited for our being and for our connecting. And this isn't a question, is it?
I don't know, you're allowed an answer. It's
Okay. I just so appreciate now at 70, am I 72 or 73? At some age, 70 plus, how much more connected and grounded, as well as how much more spiritual I am learned to feel and to be, and conscious of everything past, present, future is connected. Every being is connected. Every object is connected. And it was painful listening to the Spanish history, which, and yet there you were, a Jewish woman now, exploring and learning and expressing yourself. So that's the end. That was a sermon. Sorry.
Thank you, Hava.
Thank you.
Marty?
Are you represented in the area? Do you sell your works? At where?
I do sell my work. I'm not with any one specific gallery. I have an exhibition coming up that's going to be in Lancaster at West Art, the new community art center. That's where it's across from F&M, across from the North Museum. It's sort of an old church building that I'm really excited about. And some of these larger works will be on display. But I sell them on my own, and I have them online, and
Tamara?
Well, I just wanted to say a couple things. One, I really admire your courageousness is what I see it as. I'm like, I've always dabbled in different things, and I do force myself to dabble in different things because I want to learn them. It's just a quirky nature of mine. Like like watercolors, right? It's a challenge. So every once in a while, I just stop what I'm doing and do something in watercolors. But so for me, that's pushing boundaries because I still remember in high school, I took the guitar and I was really enjoying the guitar, but I couldn't get away from like reading the chords. Other friends could sit down and say, "Oh yeah, I think I could get that song," and they would, just play. And so after a while, I thought, "Oh, I'm no good at the guitar." And so I didn't want to sabotage art in the same way. And I listened to you, and I admire the fact that you have an idea and you do it. Like that's to me, it sounds simple, but it's not really that simple to just have an idea and do it. And I'm just getting to that point where, like, I think, oh, I don't really know how to draw, a dog or this and that, but I could probably figure it out, and I just do it. And I think that that is so freeing. It's frustrating sometimes, but it's very freeing too,
That's
because
awesome.
you want it to look like the image that you have in your head, but maybe it won't.
It's so true. I think so many people get discouraged of making art because they see what other people are making and they think, well, that everybody, most people do this. They see what other people are making and they think, oh, that's better than what I'm making. And especially when we're young, a lot of times, there's kids that will get praised for making art a certain way and we don't make it that way. So we think that maybe we're not good at it. But what you touched on with the playing guitar and what sounds like with where you're going with your artwork is that making something look like something, like if I want to paint this, make a drawing that looks like this computer, that's a skill that anyone can learn. It just takes practice. And, you know, so but what you do with it and what comes out, that's unique. And we all have that. We all have this creative expression in us that can come out. It's just a matter of getting past that point of like.
And I
judging
realized,
it.
like, I always did collages and painting, and people oftentimes commented they liked the collages. They really liked the collages. And I realized that with collages, they're totally unique. Like, you can't make a collage look like something else. It's got to be unique, and the design and the composition and everything is completely unique. And that's what makes it really good. It's not just anybody, if you copy something, the best that you could do is make it look exactly like the thing that already exists.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Tony, and then we'll get back to Mike and Haza again.
I just have a question about like what it was like at the residency. From what you presented, there wasn't much interaction with other people, or was there? And also, was it ever hard to wake up in the morning and either decide or just sort of make your way into whatever you were gonna do, or like how did that work?
Courage, right?
I developed I'll answer your second question first. I developed a ritual, where I would get up and, make my coffee and put on a podcast and just work in the studio just for a little bit and then go out. I would try to go out before, midday if I could, because things closed down in the middle of the day, depending on what I was doing. And then focus my main kind of activity and more in the afternoon and the evening. But to your first question,
I guess I'm also asking, was it ever lonely?
it was very
Yeah.
long. Yeah. To your first question, I expected there to be more of a built-in community there for me than there actually was. So Alfonso and Begonia, who are the two people that run the center, their sort of workspace is in there too, like their kind of office space, and they're both artists, and teachers, and have accomplished a lot of work. So they would come in, they would be working there during the day, but they kind of kept to themselves. And then Lucia, the intern, she would be in there. She had certain days that she was in there, but that was just part of every day. And there was a lot of time where I was alone. And there's another artist studio in that space, but it wasn't occupied when I was there. So there are times where there's multiple artists in there, and they offer space where you can stay for a longer period of time. And then people who are staying there for a month or longer do get more actively involved in the community. Like they will hold an exhibition and invite neighbors and everything for that. So, and because I was only staying 2 weeks, I didn't have that opportunity. So I really had to meet people on my own and go out, and I would just talk to people and meet people. I had like lunch with Paulo Moish's wife from the Kabbalah Center, and she ran these workshops similar to what I do here. Yeah, like I met different people and I would just connect with them. But it was a lot of solitude that I didn't expect, which was interesting. You know, before this time, I had always wanted to take like a meditation retreat or do something on my own that would be more intentionally alone. But I didn't expect that with this, and so it kind of hit me out of nowhere, and it was more of a challenge. So, yeah.
Thanks.
Mike, comment?
Thank you very much for your presentation. It's fascinating. Did you let any of the people that you encountered know that you were Jewish, or is that something you were hesitant to share in light of Spain's fraught history with the Jews?
I came there wearing my Hebrew name, a necklace that I wear times that's like my Hebrew name and a locket with my pictures of my family. And there were times that I took it off and I didn't wear it. But most of the time I felt safe wearing it. Like when I walked into Echo Art Center, I took it off. Because I felt a little bit scared. Yeah, I would say I didn't necessarily advertise it, but like if it came up, if I was talking to somebody, if I talked to somebody and I told them like why I was there, I would tell them about my project, which involved me being Jewish. And the people in the like Alfonso and Begonia, the people who run a studio, they were really supportive and of me and of my heritage and everything, all of that. So that was cool. Obviously, I mean, they invited me to come, so.
Let me say just a word for those of you not familiar with some of the history we're talking about here. We do talk about the golden age of Spanish Jewry. Keep in mind that golden age was as compared to Central and Eastern Europe, where life was miserable for Jews. We were second-class citizens there. There's no question about that. But in terms of creativity, poetry, philosophy, you mentioned Maimonides, the practice of medicine. We were able to achieve more in Spain, in Moorish Spain, and even early Catholic Spain than we had elsewhere in the world. So there's a lot going on there in terms of Jewish creativity that we often underestimate. The Kabbalah, the mysticism that emerged from that world is fascinating. It's interesting. Well, the Jews of Central and Eastern Europe were doing a lot more legal interpretation in Jewish life. In the world of the Sephardic Jews, they were doing the creative explorations, which was, fascinating in many, many ways. So it's a complex period that we're looking at here, and then to see how it emerged, and that you as an American Jew could go back there today to explore not only the art, but your Jewish identity, and to bring together these worlds of, okay, we have medieval Kabbalah here, we have contemporary geopolitics here. That just seems that there's so much going on in that one limited space and that one limited time. So it must have been fascinating. I can't begin to imagine, but it is a rich and complex history. If you've never studied it and want to, it's definitely something worthy of exploration. Other questions or comments for Joe?
What were your biggest takeaways? What did you learn from your experience, like overall?
I don't know if I have an answer for that. I can definitely point to what it did for my artwork, my studio practice. I mean, it really pushed me, really propelled my work in a lot of ways, to a space that feels very true to where I am right now. And to be, I used to work large scale when I was younger. Always made huge paintings. And the last really big painting I made was, before I had kids. And so to get back into this space of working, it feels like a homecoming for me, to sort of back to myself in a lot of ways. As does the traveling, the trips. That's something that I did a lot when I was younger, but hadn't done for a really long time. So I guess maybe the biggest takeaway would be really sort of, this sort of feeling of returning to self. I think we have to put ourselves kind of outside our comfort zone sometimes to get to those places.
Carly?
A practical question.
Yeah.
As you're preparing to do like a large format work, that paper is probably not very cheap, right? How do you
Yeah.
balance, studying, but maintaining the kind of maybe spontaneity or intuition while also not wanting to mess up your 6 foot wide piece of paper?
Yeah, I know, right? You can't just go
Just like
for
a
it
big
over
deep
the-
breath when you.
And that's the it's always a struggle for me making artwork. Is I tend to, when I have nice materials, I'm like, oh, this has got to come out well, like this has got to be a good product for the world. And that's just like automatically just kind of puts a cap on your, it's a real bummer. It's real party pooper. But I think whenever I get in a space where I'm thinking about what others are going to be looking, like how are others going to perceive this, right? So I'm thinking about creating this product. It tightens me up a little bit. So yeah, it's always like a fine dance. And that's kind of what was happening. Why I did those craft paper pieces is because I didn't want to be worrying about messing up nice paper. And then I just got comfortable enough with it where I'm like, I don't care if I mess up nice paper. I don't know. I mean, and also too, you could always paint over it. Like that giant ink drawing, if first of all, the question is like, what's a mess up? Like I do think in my process, I allow for a lot of just spontaneity and organic stuff to happen. Most of it is that way. Like even, the ones that are really copies of the smaller ones, the kind of the lines, those are more straightforward, but even in there, I allow for just stuff to happen. And usually if let's say I spill something or, something happens that's like a mistake, I tend to look at it as an opportunity. I tend to think that maybe it's not a mistake and see like where that can take me. But if all else fails, you can always gesso over the whole thing, right? But I think it's a lot of it does involve just kind of going for it and hoping for the best, and maybe knowing that in your investment in the art supplies, you have to kind of account for I don't know, there's probably some accounting term with business for that. Like there's a certain amount of waste that's going to be produced. So you have to kind of like factor
Research
that.
and development.
There's something like that. Yeah. Right.
Harvey?
Yeah, a couple of things. Sometimes when we discover that we have a particular talent, we can practice. If you're an athlete, you can practice and get better. If you're a musician, you can practice and get better. When the talent is such as yours, is it just painting and painting and painting? Are there people that you'll go to help you get better? That's my question.
I think there's no wrong way to do it. I think the one thing that's required is the doing it. doing it and doing it and doing it and doing it. I've been painting and drawing for most of my life. And I went to art school in my early 20s, and now I'm almost 48, so I've been like doing it and doing it and doing it a lot, to the point where a lot of this stuff is just comes it comes naturally, like some of the skill oriented stuff, I guess. I think but of course, you can always get develop your skills more with lessons and learning and putting yourself in different experience. I'm just somebody that likes to do my own thing, so I haven't really taken a lot of other formal classes other than when I was in art school. I really like when I teach workshops, I tell people this, but I think the best way to get good at something is through play, especially with art. I think if you can find a medium that you like to use and just go at it with a sense of play and a sense of wonder, not really too hung up on the end results. Really getting involved in the process more than the product. You can kind of have fun along the way of just looking at it as an experiment and just seeing what happens. And then if you just keep doing that, if you develop a practice of doing that, let's say 20 minutes a day, whatever it is, lo and behold, you'll develop a skill and a vocabulary, a visual vocabulary that's unique to you, because you're just sort of doing it, and your hand and your eye are trained in that certain way. I think like anything else, like you said in the beginning, if you practice like sports, like music, it's really the time that you put in the practice. And one of the cool things about art, and this is true with sports, with music, now we have brain science that's catching up to what we've always known innately about making art. We have neuroimaging that's showing us how beneficial it is for our health, for our brain health, to be engaging in art. And there are studies that are showing that engaging in art for something like 20 minutes a day can really have an impact on your overall health. So it's pretty cool to see that.
It's fascinating. What struck me there was when you said that the process was maybe even more important than the product. I like that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? Jenny,
So that was really inspiring, Joe.
can you speak up a little bit so the folks can hear you also?
That was really inspiring. My question is, did it lead you to want to continue exploring the same topic, but go to a different place, to travel to somewhere else? And if so, do you know where?
Yes, but I don't really know for sure. It did leave me wanting to go back to Spain to do more in different areas in Andalusia. But yeah, I think it would be really interesting to travel to different parts of the world with these same questions and these same ideas. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've never been to Israel. I would like to go to Israel. That might be a logical next step. I don't know.
There is a congregational trip coming up in the not too different distant future.
But even like other places where Jews, like
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, or where your family
Yeah.
was from, and kind of exploring the same types of questions pertaining to, just to see if you would feel the same, or depending on the place.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Prague, yeah, that would be cool.
Prague is great.
Do it.
Do it.
All right, thanks, guys.
We're not Joe's travel schedule for the next couple of years.
It was intense though. Like, I can't imagine doing it, for example, like this summer if I could. It was a lot. It was a lot for sure. Even just reviewing this and preparing was kind of, it's a lot.
Well, thank you. This was great.
Thank you, guys.